You want to check out the new defensive lineup for 22? Let's dive into each position and see which guys could end up with the starting spots, including our new transfers and recruits. E&A Boyd is back to talk about how our defensive scheme will influence the depth chart. And make sure to hop over to Inside Texas to discover all the latest news on recruiting and the current state of the program as we prepare for spring ball. Sign up at Inside Texas today. And as always, don't forget to pick up your new hat for the new season from Last Stand Hats. Use promo code TexasHomer, all caps, for 10% off your purchase at laststandhats.com. Texas needs to improve on defense this year, and here are the guys that can make that happen. Without further ado, let's get into it. Ian, thank you for coming back on, and let's start off with interior defensive line. At nose, we have Kiandra Coburn and T'Vondre Sweat returning, with a young Byron Murphy also making noise. And at defensive tackle, Mora Ojimo and Alfred Collins should battle it out. So what do we need to work on to improve at nose and defensive tackle?
I think Texas needs more pass rush from the nose. I think the run defense there was actually pretty good, underrated even. When teams tried to run straight at Texas, they did not do very well. If you can go watch Kiandra Coburn in a lot of his games last year, especially when it was cooled down and it wasn't 100 degrees on the field. And he was a bull. He was a bull. He was just throwing people out of the way. He had a bunch of big stops in the Red River rivalry game. Obviously, they had stops inside against Kansas State. They definitely kind of did some space eating inside and had them holding up offensive linemen so they couldn't get to the linebackers. So they weren't always put in position to shine. But they were pretty effective in what they were asked to do in the run game, which is counterintuitive because obviously Texas's run defense had so many problems last year. They were generally elsewhere from what I could tell. But the pass rush, Kiandra Coburn didn't bring a ton of pass rush. Byron Murphy, I think, has promise there, but he's still young. Sweat, probably one of the better pass rushers on the team inside, but hadn't earned a ton of snaps. So he just wasn't in position to make the most of it. There's the nose. Defensive tackle is a little bit of a different story. Ojimo was solid last year, probably one of the better players on the defense for what it's worth. And Alfred Collins will move back there, we anticipate. So that'll be a really interesting battle because Ojimo is not a bad player. He's coming back. He's not coming back to sit on the bench. He's going to be all in this offseason. But then Alfred Collins is one of the freakiest talents in the entire team and probably a more natural defensive tackle than he was at the Jack where he played last year outside. They have loads and loads of talent inside. That competition should breed really good results. We'll see how it goes.
I like moving Collins inside a lot. And a guy I get questions about often is Vernon Broughton. And he flashed early at Texas, but we've seen less of him. Is he currently on a longer development curve with the new staff?
I would be guessing, I would say a longer development curve. I thought there was times last year where you could see him make plays and look impactful. And then there'd be other times where he would lose his place, lose his gap, play high. If the coaches were asked about him, they'd probably say the same thing, which is, yeah, he looks good at times, but it's about consistency. So just whatever it is that's missing, whether it's technique, focus, or strength or conditioning to consistently, play with good pad level and show the burst he has. He might be one of those guys that really puts it together as an upperclassman, which happens maybe more rarely at that position, but it does happen where you see a guy who's like a senior, redshirt senior, and all of a sudden, they put it together.
And edge was a major issue for us last year, and we struggled to do anything meaningful there. And if we take a look at the jack position, which is our name for a strong side defensive end, does Barron Sorrell appear to be in the lead there at the moment?
It depends on how you want to weigh it. If we want to talk about O'Shawn Mathis is the leader at strong side end if he comes to Texas, which is as of yet undetermined, but seems likely at least. But he would not arrive until the summer, which is mostly negative for Texas. But it is a positive that they will have a lot of practice snaps available for Sorrell, who is the only returning jack on the team now, I think, because the other guys to play the position were Jet Bush, who moved positions to linebacker, Alfred Collins, who's moving back to defensive tackle, at times Ray Thornton, who is off the team, and then Jacoby Jones, who's off the team. Sorrell is the heir apparent at Jack. He was solid, honestly, last year. I think he ended up redshirting, if I'm not mistaken. I think he only got into 4 games, and then they held him out. He probably would have played more if not for that. So he's solid. There's a chance that he could be a winning player at that position for Texas in 2022. But obviously that's not the plan. They would rather that they have O'Shawn Mathis there and then Sorrell gets another year. And then they'll also, I believe they'll start Justice Finkley there. Finkley is 6'2", 260 out of high school, pretty big. So he has the size and the motor to play as a sort of pseudo down lineman. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Ryan Bowman, who was this 6'0", 280-pound walk-on that they had at Washington, who was just really powerful, versatile, relentless motor. Finkley is more explosive and has better length than that guy. But that's kind of what I see him becoming, is a jack that can play outside linebacker, but it could also spin inside to 4-eye and give them a lot of versatility. He could be ideal for that position and what they want down the line. So it's good that he'll get reps there. You probably don't want to see him start there. Well, we'll see how he looks, but you probably not for a year or two.
And Jordan Thomas is back on campus after some personal issues outside of his control. And does his return help out with some depth at Jack? And then also, where does David Abiara fall into the mix?
I assume Jordan Thomas will be thrown into the stew. He's got size. I don't know what shape he'll be in. I don't know. We'll kind of wait and see with him. Abiara, I think, will play buck. He'll have to compete with Ovie Oghoufo there. Abiara's got better size, just a dream, NFL-sized weak side end. They were really excited to get him. It's taking a little while for him to put it together, which is normal at a position like that. If he's as talented as they think he is, this should be around when he starts to put it together, that redshirt freshman year. If you watch like a defensive line factory, like say Clemson, they would redshirt even super talented guys, and then they would put it together as like redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores. So that'd be the hope, is that he could either replace Oghoufo this year or back him up and be close at that position. I don't know what his pass rush will look like and how far along he is there. I don't know if what's been holding him back thus far is some of the same run fit issues that plagued everybody else that played that position last year, but he has the size and length to be better there than they've had so far. And otherwise, Oghoufo is your favorite to start there, and he just needs to get a heck of a lot better at taking on pullers, and then they could have something.
And then another name we often get asked about, Prince Dorba, and he's more of a pure pass rusher, third and long type of guy. And it appeared he lacked some of the power needed to consistently play at the weak side buck position. So do we see Dorba come into his own this season?
You never really hear too much about him. I know he's still with the team. I think that he had injuries initially that slowed him up and just has never seemed to get back on track. The lack of power is crazy because he was small in high school, but he played as a 4-eye for Highland Park. So he was like inside shade battling with linemen and doing really good and still a dominant pass rusher. I had questions like, how fast is he going to be around the edge? But I thought that he would have all the scrap and the power that he would need from the position he played in high school, but just hasn't really materialized that way. I don't really know where he's at now. I think he's one of those guys that you kind of want to keep your ears out for in the spring. Maybe he either emerges or we get some better answers on where he's at.
And DJ Harris is a young guy the coaches have mentioned. Does he end up playing a role in the depth chart at Buck?
I think that weak side end position is pretty open because Oghoufo is the guy coming back, and he was athletic and there were some things he did really well, but he has a function on this team even if he doesn't play there because he can also play Sam. He had just glaring weakness in the 2-4-5 setting the edge, just missing in action at the point of attack basically. If he doesn't get better there, it's open for someone else to steal that job. They have a bunch of guys that are like, well, maybe this guy could do it, or maybe this guy could do it. The hope is kind of like maybe there's like a decent chance that Oghoufo figures it out and he becomes a more complete player. Or there's like a very small but reasonable chance that Abiara figures it out, or somebody can slide over from Jack if Mathis comes, or Harris can figure it out, or Dorba comes out of nowhere, or one of the freshmen like Jamon Tapp or Ethan Burke or somebody is immediately it's like a horse race where you have like over half the field, but they're all underdogs. One of the good, decent chance that something hits and you win some money somewhere, but in isolation, none of them look like amazing bets, right?
And we struggled at inside linebacker last year as well. And so let's start with the weak side linebacker. He plays in more space and works in more pass defense. DeMarvion Overshown should remain the starter there, but what do we need to see from DeMarvion this year to ensure he gets his NFL money?
Overshown needs to grow as a just as a pure linebacker, fundamentals of the position, ticking on blocks, diagnosing plays, playing with the right leverage, all those areas are not really where he's been great. The reason that he flashes and the reason that fans notice him is because he's so fast. Sometimes he runs plays down that other linebackers wouldn't get to. Sometimes he runs to plays that other linebackers wouldn't get to, but misses the tackle. And he's pretty rangy as a pass defender as well. This is if he's healthy this offseason, this will be the very first offseason at Texas where he's been in the linebacker room and healthy enough to participate throughout the offseason. I'm not even sure if he was healthy in the previous off seasons before when he was at safety. I think he might have missed one or two of those too, but he's definitely missed them the last two since he's been a linebacker. So he's received precious little fundamental linebacker coaching for a guy that's been in college for so long. So yeah, he's got to figure out all those things. That's why he's back. That's why he's not in the NFL. It's like the NFL looks at him and they're like, look, man, you have so much to learn about linebacker. You're too thin for us to just be like, oh, just bet on the talent. He's got really a lot to put together this offseason, but absolutely could happen.
And do you think the number 2 will linebacker will end up being David Benda? And where does Maurice Blackwell fit into the depth chart?
I think Benda will be number 2. Benda and Blackwell played in a third down package for Texas last year. They would bring those two in. And they are both pretty comfortable in coverage, I would say, it looked like. It's obviously what they had worked on to be third down guys, but they looked good at it. They're both very quick laterally, aggressive in space, physical. Blackwell, I think, worked at safety much of the year before they used him at linebacker in that third down package. I think both of those guys are seen as overshown replacements down the line. They have some of the same concerns as overshown, where it's like, okay, you're a safety hybrid kind of guy. You're fast. You can get to the ball. You can cover in space, but you also need to learn how to recognize what the offensive line is blocking and get to the right spot. It's definitely a good thing to get overshown back for another year to let those guys develop on those skills before they get thrust in there. But if he were injured or something were to go wrong this year, they do both have a lot of athletic upside at that position. And maybe Texas sets them up a little better with their defensive line play.
And then moving to middle linebacker, does Luke Brockermeyer hold on to the starting spot, especially since he's out for the spring?
No, I think Jalen Ford has got a really good grip on that job. I think he outplayed Overshown and Brockermeyer at the end of the year last year. Now he heads into spring as like number 1 in reps. So he's got the inside track on that job for sure. He could be Texas's best linebacker even next season, depending on what Overshown is able to figure out. And then Brockermeyer, ACL, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know if they can count on Brockermeyer to be really back on form and effective in the 2022 season. Like the ACL is that's like a year-long deal to really put it back together from that. I don't know. I think Brockermeyer, it'd probably be a positive ending to his story if we ever really see him play a significant role in Texas football again, because he probably misses most of this next season and then probably recruited over for the subsequent years before his eligibility runs out.
Where is Devin Richardson and Jaden Holuby in the linebacker room?
Devin Richardson was really interesting last year. Coming in from New Mexico, wherever, I thought he looked like a player that really knew where to be and how to fit the run, but was very athletically limited. And then last year at Texas, when he played, he actually looked like he had no idea where to be, was very hesitant, even worse than the starters who were notoriously not that fast reacting. But he looked a lot quicker and more athletic than I had presumed. That was positive. You figure he can figure out eventually where to be. So he should be filling out the depth chart somewhere. But again, probably not as a starter because of what we saw from Jalen Ford. And then Holuby, I'm not really sure where he's at. That's kind of it's a guy we'll hear about in spring, I imagine, and have a firmer idea of where he fits.
Good stuff. And now let's move into the defensive backs. Let's start with nickel, which is called star in our system. Anthony Cook was a bright spot last year, but I've seen there's going to be some movement in the secondary. Do you see him landing the nickel's job or moving somewhere else to help the team?
The interesting thing about Anthony Cook last year was that they didn't really play coverages that would use him to carry verticals up the field. So he wasn't turning and running with slot receivers down the field, which was kind of surprising because it was like, this guy's a converted corner. If he's not doing that, why is he here? They played a Sam linebacker instead of him at times last year. They would play Okofu out there. I wondered if they would move Overshown out there because of the way they deployed it. So he was definitely good on the edge. He defended screens well. He tackled well. He was useful in the blitz, but he wasn't really impact in the coverage scheme with his man coverage abilities. For this next year, I think they'll move him to strong safety in the boundary, where he'll be freed up like he was at nickel to be a tackler and to be a zone defender, maybe a blitzer from time to time. Play off of the boundary corner, which we'll talk about in a minute, and go with someone who's a little more of a coverage defender in the nickel, play more man coverage.
And corner actually has the most consequential battles because anybody who doesn't start there actually has potential to start somewhere else in the secondary. So definitely keep an eye on the corners this year. And Desean Jameson is a veteran, multi-year starter, but we have seen some struggles there. So what does he need to do to guarantee himself a starting spot in his final season?
He needs to be more consistent in coverage. He lost his guys at times last year. He was a guy that when Sarkisian would talk about mental focus and guys losing it and then losing receivers, that was often Jameson to whom he was referring. So he just was this guy that they couldn't really trust to stick on guys outside in coverage. They would play him in press man coverage at times. Sometimes he was good at it, and then other times, the ball's thrown over his head and he's trailing and he lost eyes on his guy or something. I think they'll move him to field corner in some regards to make his job easier. In other regards, he might have less help out there. He really needs to put it together. There's some guys like Jahdae Barron and Terrence Brooks that could be nipping at his heels if he's not putting it together in this last year.
We also brought in Ohio State corner Ryan Watts. So, off the bat, do you think he secures the boundary corner spot?
Yeah, I think they got him with the strict intention of playing him at boundary corner because he's big. He can play some man. He can be a blitzer or run defender on the edge if you want to give a safety over the top. Maybe an Anthony Cook plays with him, and then you have that duo playing off each other. He'll be really interesting. He can definitely play some press man coverage. He did it at Ohio State, and he looked pretty solid. They recruited him to be more of a Richard Sherman cover 3 kind of guy, and he looks solid at that as well. He doesn't have a lot of his athletic measurables are off the charts except for 40 time. The 40 time is good, not amazing, but his quickness and his reach and length are all amazing. I'm really curious to see what they have planned as far as, the coverage schemes they want to play and how they want to use him. Gary Patterson, depending on how much say he has, Gary Patterson would definitely use him like he used Hadari Caesar at TCU last year, playing a lot of man coverage and freeing up the strong safety.
And you just mentioned a few of the guys that can compete for a starting spot in Jahdae Barron, Keaton Crawford, and even early enrollee Terrence Brooks. So who is most likely to give the starters a run for their money?
I think Barron is very likely to either start or have a prominent role in the 2 deep where he's rotating in a lot. It could be at corner or it could be at nickel. Played a fair amount last year and was kind of a playmaker, really. He was really good in zone coverage. He might get a look inside at nickel, or he might, push Jameson at field corner. We'll kind of have to wait and see. Brooks, obviously, big time talent. I think he is probably more of a boundary corner because of his length and physicality, unless he moves inside to safety down the line. I used to think he would end up at safety, but apparently he's just very skilled in checking receivers, son of a pro. Have to kind of wait and see on that. I am very confident that he'll be a very good football player, but I'm not totally sure where exactly that'll be. And then Crawford is kind of a mystery to me. He's definitely well regarded within the program as an athlete and a physical player, but yet we don't seem to see him on the field very often. He might get moved to safety this year, and maybe that'll unlock his potential.
I'm excited about the corner position for the first time in a while. And looking at safety, there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made, especially in the run game. So if we start with free safety, does Jaron Thompson likely hold on to his starting spot?
Jaron Thompson is, I think, going to play some nickel this spring. Good athlete. I thought he was decent at times last year. Sometimes he's playing so far off the ball, and then by the time he gets there, there's a mess in front of him because somebody didn't play the right angle on the edge or whatever, and then he's unable to break down and make a tackle in space. He was just set up for failure a lot, I think. Physical guy, good size. I think he'll get a look at nickel. He has the range to play free safety as well. Pretty good bet to end up at one of those 2 positions in the starting lineup. At nickel, it's probably between him and Barron, since they weren't able to get the Georgia guy. And at free safety could be between him and JD Coffey. Coffey, physical, extremely rangy and fast, flashed a lot last year in some limited snaps, but only a sophomore. That's an inexperienced guy to put in a position like that, so he'll need to be pretty good. I don't know. Maybe Barron at nickel and Thompson at free safety is the smartest bet, unless they really think Coffey is going to be a star, which they might.
I love Coffee in his high school tape. He was a smart kid with good instincts, and I've been waiting on him to get a little bit more shine. And then at boundary safety, they play in less space. They help out more in the run game. And there's a good chance that Anthony Cook starts there, but we also have early enrollees in BJ Allen and Larry Turner Gooden. So do you think either of them could back up the starter at boundary safety so early on?
I would lean towards Larry Turner Gooden. I think that they would like to have somebody who's really big and physical there. Just they're closer to the action, so they can move around in a lot of different ways, and that can really throw an offense off. And then they're also, because they're close to the action, it's nice to have a guy there who can kind of knife through against the run and just be like a extra linebacker in the box all of a sudden when you don't expect it. If you watch like Kyle Hamilton for Terry Joseph at Notre Dame, he would do that some. Anthony Cook is not that. Anthony Cook might be really valuable for different things he can do and just being reliable, but he's not going to be like, oh my gosh, what's this guy doing here in the box? This guy's a problem. He's going to like blow by our guard and kill the quarterback or something. Larry Turner Gooden seems like he might have the frame and size to eventually be kind of like that. And then Allen, maybe as well, although I think Allen is a little more of maybe a free safety type to play in space and erase space rather than being like a extra intimidator in the box. That's my sense of coming out of high school. Larry Turner Gooden hasn't played as much in a while. A little bit of an unknown there. And then Allen, we'll get very early returns on him here because he's able to participate in spring.
Nice. Now let's go big picture. What was the biggest issue to address on defense last year, sans conditioning late in the game?
They have to be impactful on the edge. They were a downright weak spot on the edge last year. They need to flip that all the way from weak spot to team strength, which I think is possible. Depending on how far on that trajectory they get, I think you could see a massive shift in how good this defense is next year that would shock people. This is a 3-4, 2-4-5 defense. Like, it's designed to feature linebackers. None of the linebackers on the team last year were all Big 12. I don't know if even any of them were all Big 12 honorable mention. So, I mean, that's like an enormous disparity between the intention and the outcome. So if they get a lot better there, the whole unit could be way, 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 way better. And I know people will talk about other problems like the safeties or whatever else, but I am adamant that getting good at linebacker is the number one thing that would make a big difference for this team.
Yeah, and Sark did do something weird when he hired most position coaches before the coordinator, and that can cause some issues. So do you think the coaches will improve naturally due to another year in the scheme and also getting to gel with each other more?
Yeah, I think the continuity and the chance to have another offseason to be like, okay, here's what worked, here's what we have, here's what we have to do, here's what we have to defend. It will make, I think, a difference. It could make a very substantial difference. There are things about this team that are just ripe for one of those massive turnarounds where people are like, where did this come from? Like Michigan going from 2-4 to playoffs, or Baylor going from 2-7 to Big 12 champions. I really think that is possible for this team because they have a lot of talent in a few different places, more so on offense probably than defense, but there's just so many places where it's like, hey, if you just tweak a couple things here, there's a chance to get like an avalanche going this offseason. And we've seen it before. Like we saw that in 2018 on the Texas offense, where they just brought everyone back. They fixed tackle with Calvin Anderson. Sam Ehlinger figured it out, and then they're in the Big 12 championship game. That's optimistic, but it honestly looks very feasible to me.
And then for the grand finale, let's go position by position and give me your best bet for each starter. Let's do the 2-4-5 scheme as the template.
I think next year when they're in the 2-4-5 nickel package, which they will probably be the defense they're in most of the time, I think it'll be Jack, Mathis if he transfers in, otherwise Sorrell, Nose, Coburn again, but with Murphy playing a lot. And I would watch for Murphy potentially overtaking him if Coburn doesn't have a strong offseason. Tackle, Oh, I, I raced into this one. This one's maybe even tougher still. I think Ojimo will. No, I don't think that. I think Collins will ultimately steal that job from Ojimo. The Buck weak side in position. I think Ogofu will hang on, but I'm curious about Abiara. Weak side linebacker, Overshown. Mike linebacker, Jalen Ford. Star, I'm going to go Jaron Thompson. Boundary corner, Ryan Watts. Strong boundary safety, Anthony Cook. Field safety, we'll say JD Coffee. Maybe he can have a really big offseason. And then field corner, Desean Jameson. But yeah, I think he'll have sort of a contract year kind of season, and he'll hold on to that job.
Ian, thanks so much for coming by again and showing us the likely defensive lineup. And please tell all the beautiful viewers out there where to track down your work.
Check out Inside Texas. Lots of Texas content over there from me and from the rest of the team. I'll have a new game plan about what the offensive line will look like coming out Thursday of this week. I'm not sure when this video will come out, but it'll probably be published when you're watching this video. And then check out the Flyover Football Board. We're going to be talking, just wrapped up a big series where I previewed every single Big 12 team based on what we know about them heading into next year. And with that done, we're going to start to look at some more national topics, start to look at some of the main national contenders for 2022, such as, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Georgias. So check that out as well.
And that is a wrap on Ian A. Boyd. And make sure to go over to Inside Texas to stay current as spring ball nears. Thanks for hanging out. Watch more of my videos here. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want to support quality Texas content. As always, hook 'em.